Welcome to How It Happened, the channel that brings you fascinating stories about historical and current events that shape our world. From the rise and fall of empires to the latest scientific discoveries, we explore the events and people that have shaped our past and continue to influence our present. Our channel is all about discovering the history behind events, and we believe that it's important to understand how we got to where we are today. By exploring the stories behind the events that have shaped our world, we can gain a deeper appreciation of the challenges, struggles, and triumphs of those who came before us. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the events of September 11, 2001, a day that will forever be etched in the memory of the world. The 9/11 attacks, as they came to be known, were a series of 4 coordinated terrorist attacks carried out by the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda. On September 11, 2001, the world watched in horror as terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airplanes and carried out coordinated attacks against the United States. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the attacks, and the event became a defining moment in U.S. history. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the key figures involved in the attacks, including Osama bin Laden and George W. Bush, and examine the lasting impact of the attacks on the world. Osama bin Laden was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 1957 and was the son of a wealthy construction magnate. In the 1980s, he became involved in the fight against Soviet forces in Afghanistan and later founded the Al-Qaeda terrorist group, which was responsible for the September 11 attacks. Bin Laden had been a leading figure in the jihadist movement for decades and had previously been involved in attacks against U.S. targets, including the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. In the aftermath of the September 11 attacks, bin Laden became the most wanted man in the world, and the U.S. launched a global manhunt to capture or kill him. He managed to evade capture for almost a decade before he was finally located and killed by U.S. forces in 2011. The operation to kill bin Laden was carried out by U.S. Navy SEALs and took place in the early hours of May 2, 2011, in the Pakistani city of Abbottabad. The operation was carefully planned and executed with precision, with U.S. forces descending on bin Laden's compound in helicopters and engaging in a firefight with his guards. After the firefight, bin Laden was found hiding in his bedroom and was shot and killed by U.S. forces. His body was taken into custody and later buried at sea in accordance with Islamic tradition. The operation to kill bin Laden was a significant victory for the United States in its ongoing war on terror. It demonstrated the country's military prowess and its determination to bring those responsible for the September 11 attacks to justice. It also marked the end of a long and difficult chapter in U.S. history and provided some closure for the families of the victims of the attacks. However, the operation was also controversial. The fact that it took place on Pakistani soil without the knowledge or consent of the Pakistani government raised questions about the country's role in the war on terror and strained relations between the United States and Pakistan. The operation also raised concerns about the use of military force to achieve political goals, particularly in light of the high civilian casualties that have resulted from the war on terror. Bin Laden's legacy is one of terror and violence. His actions have led to the deaths of thousands of people and sparked a global war on terror. While bin Laden himself is no longer a threat, the ideologies and organizations he helped create continue to inspire extremist groups around the world. The ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, including the Syrian civil war and the rise of ISIS, are all linked to bin Laden's legacy. George W. Bush was the president of the United States at the time of the September 11 attacks. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, Bush was praised for his strong leadership and resolve. He famously addressed the nation from the Oval Office on the evening of September 11, declaring that freedom itself was attacked this morning. Bush soon launched a global war on terror, which included military campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq. However, his handling of the war on terror and the intelligence leading up to the war in Iraq would later become controversial. Many criticized Bush's administration for using the attacks as an excuse to invade Iraq, which had no direct connection to the September 11 attack. Bush's legacy is one of mixed success and controversy. While he is credited with preventing further terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, his decisions and policies during the war on terror have been criticized as heavy-handed and misguided. The use of enhanced interrogation techniques, the creation of the Guantanamo Bay detention camp, and the invasion of Iraq all continue to be points of debate and criticism. So, what is the truth behind the tragic events that took place? The September 11 attacks were a series of coordinated terrorist attacks carried out by Al-Qaeda, a militant Islamic extremist group, against targets in the United States on September 11, 2001. The attacks resulted in the deaths of nearly 3,000 people and caused significant damage to the World Trade Center complex in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The attacks were planned and coordinated by Al-Qaeda's leader, Osama bin Laden, and his deputy, Ayman al-Zawahiri. The attackers were mostly from Saudi Arabia, but also included individuals from Egypt, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates. The attackers hijacked 4 commercial airplanes and used them as weapons to target high-profile buildings in the United States. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, was flown into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City at 8:46 a.m. local time. The second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, was flown into the South Tower of the World Trade Center just 17 minutes later. The attacks on the World Trade Center caused both towers to collapse, killing thousands of people and causing extensive damage to the surrounding area. A third plane, American Airlines Flight 77, was hijacked and flown into the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense in Washington, D.C. The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, was also hijacked and headed for an unknown target, but crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers attempted to take control of the plane from the hijackers. Theories about the September 11 attacks being an inside job or a false flag operation by the U.S. government have been circulating since shortly after the attacks occurred. While these theories are not supported by any credible evidence, they have been popularized by a number of conspiracy theorists, documentaries, and websites. One of the most prominent theories is that the World Trade Center towers were brought down by a controlled demolition, rather than by the impact of the planes and the resulting fires. Proponents of this theory argue that the buildings collapsed too quickly and too symmetrically to be the result of a natural collapse. They also point to footage of the towers collapsing, which they claim shows evidence of explosives being used to bring the buildings down. However, this theory has been thoroughly debunked by structural engineers, who have explained that the collapse of the buildings was caused by the combination of the damage from the planes and the resulting fires. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, conducted a detailed investigation into the collapse of the towers and concluded that the buildings failed due to a combination of factors, including the impact of the planes, the resulting fires, and the design of the building. Another theory is that the U.S. government allowed the attacks to happen or actively orchestrated them in order to justify its foreign policy goals, including the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. Supporters of this theory point to the fact that several members of the Bush administration had ties to the oil industry and that the U.S. had been seeking to gain control of Middle Eastern oil reserves for years. However, there is no credible evidence to support these claims. The 9/11 Commission report, which was the result of an extensive investigation by an independent panel of experts, concluded that the attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda and that there was no evidence of government involvement. Despite the lack of evidence, conspiracy theories about the September 11 attacks continue to circulate on the internet and in certain communities. These theories often involve wild speculation and unfounded claims, but they can have serious consequences. They can contribute to a general sense of mistrust towards government institutions and official narratives, and they can also fuel extremist ideologies and conspiracy thinking. The legacy of the September 11 attacks had a profound impact on the United States and the world. The attacks led to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and the implementation of new security measures at airports and other public places. The attacks also sparked debates about civil liberties and government surveillance, with some arguing that the U.S. had gone too far in its efforts to prevent another attack. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that followed the attacks have cost thousands of American lives and trillions of dollars, and their legacies continue to shape U.S. foreign policy today. The attacks also had a lasting impact on American culture and society. The attacks were a traumatic event that left deep scars on the American psyche, with many Americans experiencing fear and a sense of vulnerability. The attacks also led to a surge in patriotism and a sense of national unity, with Americans coming together to support each other in the aftermath of the attacks. The attacks also had an impact on popular culture, with numerous films, television shows, and books exploring the events and aftermath of September 11. The attacks also had a significant impact on Muslim Americans who faced increased scrutiny and discrimination in the aftermath of the attacks. The 9/11 attacks were carried out by extremists claiming to act in the name of Islam, and this led to a rise in Islamophobia in the United States. Muslim Americans faced discrimination, hate crimes, and a general atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust. Many Muslim Americans reported feeling ostracized and singled out in their communities, with some even facing physical attacks or vandalism. This discrimination and prejudice towards Muslim Americans continues to this day, despite efforts to promote tolerance and understanding. On a global scale, the September 11 attacks had a profound impact on international relations and diplomacy. The attacks triggered a global response, with countries around the world coming together to condemn the attacks and offer support to the United States. However, the subsequent war on terror also led to increased tensions and conflicts in the Middle East, as well as heightened anti-American sentiment in some parts of the world. The legacy of the September 11 attacks continues to shape U.S. foreign policy and international relations to this day. The September 11 attacks were a defining moment in U.S. history, and their impact continues to be felt today. The attacks and the subsequent war on terror have had far-reaching consequences, both in the United States and around the world. The key figures involved in the attacks, including Osama bin Laden and George W. Bush, have left lasting legacies that continue to shape the world we live in. As we remember the victims of the September 11 attacks, we must also consider the ongoing impacts of this tragedy and strive to build a more peaceful and just world for all. So with that said, we hope you enjoyed our video about the 9/11 and that you've learned something new about the tragic events that took place that night. If you did, please consider giving us a like and subscribing to our channel, How It Happened, for more fascinating videos about history and current events. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.